Thank you. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. I want to thank the royal family, His Royal Highness, Her Royal Highness, and the Foundation for inviting me to speak with you today. I am an infectious disease doctor who began his career right at the time that the world was rudely being introduced to a new disease, and that new disease has come to be known as HIV infection. HIV is essentially an infection of the immune system, and that's why people fare so badly when they become HIV infected. The more a cell gets infected and produces new viruses, the more viruses that are produced, the worse a person does. And as a result, we've ended up with a global epidemic that is one of the major medical crises of our time. How big is this crisis? Well, I work a lot in South Africa, and there it's very apparent what the extent of the epidemic is. We did a simple experiment last year just to try and gauge this by testing women that were coming in with pregnancy to see what percentage of them were HIV infected. So we looked by age group at 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, etc. And the numbers we found were really quite horrific. 15-year-olds were generally not infected because if they'd been infected by their mothers, they died by the time they reached age 15. But by age 16, 10% of women were infected. By age 17, 20% of women. And it peaked at 66% at age 23. So this is happening now in the world. And 30 years into this epidemic, we still don't have a vaccine to deal with preventing this disease. We have treatments, thankfully, that have made a huge difference in those that are fortunate enough to be able to have access to them. But that, sadly, is still not everybody in the world that needs it. What's the solution? Well, to me, the solution is that we come up with an HIV vaccine. There's no question that we need that. In places like Africa, where people are living in poverty, where there are the basic needs in terms of electricity and running water and other things that are so difficult to accommodate for people, what one sees is that one can give medications. It's expensive. It's lifelong. Really, the solution to this epidemic is going to be the development of a vaccine. So we have actually been working in South Africa. Initially, we went there to ask a simple question, which is, why are children doing worse than adults when they get infected? When we went, we thought, well, we'll get some samples and bring them back to the United States the way we usually do research, and we'll test them there. We weren't quite prepared, though, for what we found when we got to South Africa, which was a problem of greater enormity than I had ever imagined, and also an enthusiasm among people there to actually get involved in doing something about the epidemic. We started to think that if we could actually build a small laboratory there and do the work on site, we could potentially train local individuals and build capacity to work on the epidemic right at its epicenter. And so we took this idea further and started shopping around the idea to different foundations. What if we built a biomedical research institute and put it right in the middle of the epidemic, in the worst part of the epidemic in Africa? Could we not recreate what you have here in Barcelona, what we have in Boston, where you have medical research and clinical care right next to each other? Fortunately, we were able to get funding from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and in 2003, we were able to open the first dedicated biomedical research institute to ever be built at an African university, together with our South African collaborators who really took the lead on this program. And I think that the reason that the Doris Duke Foundation got involved was because they saw that this was an idea that emanated from Africans who wanted to do more about this epidemic. We were able to train local graduates from the university there to become involved in biomedical research, and very rapidly we were making advances that we never could have made in Boston because we were studying the patients there at the heart of the epidemic. We were, however, really struggling with an issue, which was that at that time there was no treatment available in South Africa. So we had to come up with a way to be able to provide something back to our patients. We were enrolling patients to help us understand how the body tries to fight infection. We would go back a month later to try and get another blood sample from the mother and find out that the baby had died of AIDS or that the mother had died of AIDS. And so we tried to use our creativity to think about how we could approach this. We needed to find somebody that would buy drugs for us to treat these patients, and we went to the Harvard Endowment thinking, well, they have $25 billion. They should be able to help us with a little bit. We went to pharmaceutical companies. We were unable to get any support anywhere. And then finally came up with an idea, which was to let the patients tell their own story. The support group that we had put together, that had been put together at the hospital we were working at, sang Zulu a cappella songs as they would get together to support one another. We were able, through philanthropy, to get funding to make a CD of their incredibly beautiful music, had high school students in the U.S. sell the CD, and raised enough money to start the patients that we were studying on treatment. And all of those patients are still alive today because of this work that was done by these young people in the United States. With these clinical teams we put together, now we had really the situation that we'd been looking for, which was to be able to try and study the clinical disease, treat the clinical disease, and understand why we're having the problem we're having. Why is the immune system basically breaking down? We had another very fortunate thing that happened, which was another philanthropist came along, Mark Schwartz, with his wife Lisa, who gave us a donation to extend the amount of treatment that we were providing to people locally, and also helped us to set up a small clinic at a hospital named McCourt Hospital that had, interestingly, this incredible electronic medical record that they had established. And here's where the story of Terry Reagan comes in. At this hospital, the superintendent asked me if I would meet with the person who sells the software for their electronic medical record. And I kept saying, you know, I really don't have time for this. I think he's just trying to sell me more stuff. So for about a year, I kind of avoided this meeting. Finally, I acquiesced. When I met with the person, he said basically all he wanted me to do was to sit down with Terry Reagan, the owner of this electronic medical record, and tell him that this EMR was saving patients' lives. I said, well, that's certainly easy for me to do, because it was. They had a few thousand patients at that point on treatment, and they were able to care for them in a better way, even, I think, than we could at Mass General at that time because of this electronic medical record. So I met with Terry Reagan in Boston, and it turned out that he lived in Boston. We sat down for about a half an hour. I told him about what we were doing. He said he didn't really understand why I would want to be in Africa when I had terrific facilities in Boston, and asked me a lot of questions about what our motivation was to be there. At any rate, at the end of the conversation, I suggested that he should come to South Africa to see what's going on there so that he could get a better understanding. And he really owed it to himself to understand his electronic medical record and what a difference it was making. So I went back to my office, and when I got back to my office, my secretary said she'd just gotten this strange call from Terry Reagan's secretary saying that he wanted to come with me on my next trip to Africa in 2 weeks. And I paused and thought, I can't believe this is true. I really only talked to this guy for about 30 minutes, and we didn't seem like we really connected that well. But at any rate, it did sound like he was thinking about coming. I really didn't believe it. I told my secretary to make sure, though, that if we got tickets on a flight together, to make sure that we weren't sitting together, because I didn't even know this guy, and it's a very long flight to get to South Africa. Terry ended up coming. I met him. I was getting my boarding pass at the airport. Terry walked in with his rollerboard just as I was getting my boarding pass and said, let's make sure we sit together. So we sat together on this flight that took about 24 hours to get to South Africa. And en route, I said, most of what we've done in South Africa has been based on philanthropy, and it would be great if your company would make a donation to what we're doing. I had no idea what level he might be able to make a donation at. And he said, well, I don't want to get your hopes up, I see a lot of different things, but it's very rare that I give any money because I like my donations to be leveraged, to actually do something more than the money itself can do by bringing other things together. So I thought, okay, well, this is kind of a shame, but we'll make do. And we got to South Africa, and I simply had him, we simply had Terry sit in on patient visits in the doctor's offices as young person after young person dying of HIV came through, and he got a chance to see his electronic medical record working, and he got a chance to see, again, the enormity of this problem and how it's impacting individual lives. Terry, I think, was very taken by that. During this time, I was also explaining to him about the fact that we knew HIV infects cells, and we know that the immune system tries to fight that, but really we don't know nearly what we need to know in order to make a vaccine. And that research is really a place where we need to put a lot more effort. And so in the context of that, and in the context of taking Terry around to see the other things we'd gotten involved in, like working with Habitat for Humanity to build housing for patients' families, working with orphan-led households, working, as in this photograph, with Whiz Kids United, a local organization that teaches life skills to kids through soccer. He got a sense that science really goes from the laboratory all the way out to the people, and that one had to look at this epidemic in that sort of a context.